Michael Gibbs came into my life at a perfect time. One could say he saved my life. It might be a little hyperbole, but in some ways I feel it's really true. I was in my junior year at Berklee College of Music, and I kind of got to a point after 2 years of really structured theory and advanced ear training and arranging courses and things like that, where I noticed that I'd go to concerts and I'd be crossing my arms, just sort of folding them over and over-analyzing pretty much everything I heard. And yeah, I was really good at dissecting pretty much anything that I heard, but I also was feeling kind of frustrated with what I was hearing and probably getting a little too snobby about it, and what I thought was sort of a lack of inventiveness with what I was hearing in the music of that time period. Or it could have just been me being a jerk. Who knows? But there was a period where I was just getting frustrated with what I was hearing, and I was definitely just feeling like I was overanalyzing everything. And in the first 20 minutes on the very first day of Michael's jazz arranging for large ensemble course, he just blew everybody's brain. He drew 2 voicings on the chalkboard. And he asked us something like, "Can you tell me what this is?" And most everyone chimed in with everything they possibly could think of, from their arranging and theory courses that they learned at school. And with every response that every student posed, every guess that every student had, it was answered by Michael saying, "I don't know what that is. What is that?" And each student would explain whatever that technique was. And then Michael's response would be, "Oh, no, it's not that. Anybody else?" And then after about 15 or 20 minutes of all of us sort of taking a stab at what we thought this, what we thought these 2 voicings were, he just simply drew 2 lines and said, "See how this switches to this? And that swaps to that? It's kind of like a mirror image. Isn't that cool?" And at that point, our minds were just blown. Just that idea of a simple relationship between 2 voicings. And then Michael went on to ask us a little later in the day, after showing us Eric Satie, his gymnopédie piano pieces, he would ask, "What is the essence of this piece?" And if anybody said anything technical, he'd always respond with, "What's that?" And then usually, "No, it's not that." But I remember one student replied with green, and Michael kind of lit up. His face lit up, and he just sort of leaned forward in his chair, and he goes, "Tell me more." And I think that first day in that class, what Michael kind of got me back in touch with was that music is something you feel. And you have to sometimes ask yourself, what does my heart tell me? What feels right? What does my intuition say? And I'd buried those sensibilities kind of deep down underneath all the technical, analytical, theoretical kinds of stuff that I had been learning as to approaches to music creation. And I really wasn't considering my other senses at all. And he was a critical influence for me. These days, pretty much all my writing is a blend of my technical and theoretical foundation, which, because I'm a big nerd, that's always going to be there. But along with that, it's how something feels, how it feels in here. And I think there's more of a balance now. Well, I generally rely, as far as the order, I rely on what my heart tells me over what my mind tells me when it comes to final decisions. And this kind of goes back to like what I talked about several weeks ago with Toshiko, the idea of what remains on the page. So I might come up with some sort of technical conceptual idea, but what really dictates whether it stays on the page is after I've sort of worked it out. I ask myself, how does that feel to me? Does it feel right? And it kind of goes back to Michael's whole thing about, so what is the essence of a piece of music? So guess what I named this dedication? It's called Essence. And this piece is, when I think of Michael, actually Michael had heard a demo of this piece, and his response was, it's kind of a nostalgic piece, and he's dead on. It is a very nostalgic sounding piece. It's got some kind of interesting, complex kinds of things going on in it. But yeah, the essence of it is definitely a little nostalgic. Michael was a trombone player. That was his principal instrument. And I wanted to feature the trombone as a lead instrument, as sort of a nod to him. I also really wanted the piece to work around a central concept or a central core, which goes back to that whole concept of what is the essence of something. And as I was thinking about these different elements and experimenting with different ideas, as I started off experimenting with some melodic ideas. I wanted something to sound kind of beautiful, and I was playing this melody, and my hands kept gravitating and repeating this particular melodic sequence. It was about 6 notes, and as I was continuing to explore this, it became really clear that I really hadn't repeated any notes in the sequence. It wasn't. And I was sort of heading in the direction of more of a 12-tone row, like a serial composition kind of a thing, which in jazz is like very unusual, and to say the least. And I'm definitely this would be me being super nerdy about stuff, so with all the serial composition kind of ideas. But there was something about this little experiment that seemed super satisfying, and in the end, every melodic phrase, every little section, it's like each 8-bar section of melody is actually a tone row. I think I start with it's like an 11-note row in the first one. For some reason, and this is sort of this goes back to how things feel. Like, I kind of worked through a row, and then I really didn't include a 12th tone, which is kind of, it's not really a 12-tone row, so it's an 11-tone row. So it was sort of this weird little accident as I was going through it. I just forgot a note, but when I tried to put it in that first phrase, it just never worked. So it's an 11-note row. It's just what it is, and that's going back to how things feel, right? And the other phrases in the main melody are more 12-note rows, but they're all distinctive tone rows within each 8-bar section. And even with that, you could do tone row composition, and it could sound not very tonal. It could sound a little strange. If you've ever listened to Schoenberg's works, there's a whole set of rules with serial composition. I was not even going to follow any sort of serial composition rules. I like the idea of just having the tone row as the melody, but I wanted the harmony to actually be more traditional, more of a traditional jazz ballad kind of a harmony. And so let's see. I think the reason for that is I want the audience to have something to connect to. That sounded very lush and pretty, which is very in character for a ballad like this, without sounding too non-tonal. And this mix of a more tonal harmony with this sort of unusual melodic approach, I kind of feel works great. And it's very much along the lines of my own essence of how I work, where I'm sort of blending my head and my heart together and my writing. And so it's a piece that's very much my sensibilities about things, but it's also very much in homage to Michael. And I'm trying to think, there's this other aspect of Michael that comes to mind. He always challenged us to rethink pretty much everything we would do. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, like, you'd come up with an idea and he would just challenge you with, like, he would just say something about it, and next thing you know, you're rethinking everything. And a great example of that is, and I love that he did this, for this particular album project, I've asked a lot of the people that are either mentors themselves that I've dedicated these pieces to, or some of the people who are going to play on the album, to write like 1 or 2 paragraphs about who were their mentors, who were people that were influential to them, and sort of pass on this idea of master apprentice, mentor, and pupil. And Michael was really sweet about everything, and he said, I'm gonna, I've been thinking about it. I haven't had time. I've been super busy. And I'm like, sure, no problem. Just send it to me whenever you can. And then one day I got this great text from him that was just this giant, it was not 2 paragraphs. It was like a giant story of pretty much the history of jazz and Michael's, all the people in Michael's life who were influential to him. And so in essence, he broke the rules. And at the same time, I kind of was like thinking to myself, damn, Michael, you're rethinking this whole project again. Now I have to start like, some sort of a foundation of mentorship and now there has to be some sort of like, nonprofit organization that sort of is archiving mentorship in the arts. So yeah, he still challenges us and makes us rethink everything, and I so love that about him.